All right, we are going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. So welcome everyone to the April 7th, 2025 meeting of the Town of Arlington Redevelopment Board. My name is Rachel Zemberry. I'm the chair of the board, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. Could the other members of the board please introduce themselves?
Steve Revelak.
Eugene Benson.
Shayna Corman Houston.
Ken Lowe.
And we also have joining us this evening the Director of the Department of Planning and Community Development, Claire Ricker.
Thank you.
All right, let's move to our first agenda item, which is a review of the meeting minutes. We have two sets of meeting minutes to review this evening. The first is the set from March 17th, 2025, and we'll see if there are any additions or corrections, starting with Steve.
No changes.
Jean?
No changes.
Shayna?
No changes.
Ken?
No changes.
And I have no changes either. Is there a motion to approve the March 17th meeting minutes as submitted?
So motion.
Second.
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Those meeting minutes have been approved. We'll now move to the March 24th, 2025 meeting minutes to see if there are any additions or corrections, starting with Steve.
None.
Jean?
No changes.
Shayna?
No.
Ken?
No changes.
And I have none either. Is there a motion to approve as submitted?
So motion.
Second.
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. Those meeting minutes have been approved. All right. That concludes our first agenda item. We'll now move to the continued public hearing on the warrant articles for 2025 town meeting. We will reopen this public hearing. This is the fifth night of 5 nights of hearings as published in the Redevelopment Board's schedule on Nova's agenda for a total of 20 warrant articles. So we have already heard all of the article applicants and the public wishing to speak on each of these articles. Tonight, the board will be discussing each of the articles and voting in turn. What I'd like to do is take each article as it comes and then vote as we finish the discussion. I know in the past, at times, we have gone through the discussion on all articles and then voted, trying to make things a little bit easier for the department because they have a very fast turnaround for their report. So are there any concerns with voting on each article as we discuss it from the board? Jean?
No.
Shayna, you're good with that?
No concerns.
Ken?
I have no issues.
Okay, fantastic. What I'd also like to suggest is that we start with Article 26 and come back to Article 25. I think Article 25 is where we have the most discussion, and I think it would be good to make sure that we leave ourselves plenty of time to discuss that as we finalize the recommendation. Are there any concerns with starting with Article 26 and taking Article 25 at the conclusion from the board?
No concern.
Okay. Claire, are you good with that?
I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Perfect, great. So with that, let's move to Article 26, which is a zoning bylaw amendment related to transportation demand management plan. Open up my attachment here. We have already discussed this a bit, but I will turn it over to the board members for any final comments on the language. Our intent will be to create a motion at the end of each of these discussions to recommend favorable action or recommend no action for each of these articles. So we'll start, Ken, with you for any comments or further discussion on Article 26.
I have none at this time.
Great. Shayna?
None.
Jean?
None.
And Steve?
Keep it short. This is something we put sort of on our to-do list when we, at the time the board was working on the MBTA Communities Act. We felt we needed to have TDM measures which were, better accommodated smaller projects and residential-only projects, and I think these are a good step in that direction. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I agree. I think that this is the culmination of a change that the board has been talking about making for the past several months. So it's good to have the language to hopefully move forward to town meeting. So is there a motion to recommend favorable action on Article 26?
So motioned.
Second.
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. So with a vote of 5-0, we will recommend favorable action for Article 26. I will also note, I have reviewed with Town Council and with Director Ricker the voting threshold for each of these articles, and this is subject to a simple majority rather than the supermajority of 2/3 for town meeting. All right, let's move to the next article, which is Article 27, related to deleting the inland wetland overlay district, and we'll see if there is any additional discussion on this article, starting with Ken.
No, this is deletion of a zoning article that's already repetitive already, that's covered somewhere else. So I think this is good.
Great. Shayna?
Nothing.
Jean?
None.
Steve?
So I'm supportive. I think this removes the bit of ambiguity over which board has jurisdiction over wetlands, and that should be the Conservation Commission. Thank you.
Great. I agree. Is there a motion to recommend favorable action for Article 27?
So motioned.
Second.
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. Article 27 will move forward with favorable action with a vote of 5-0. Note that this is subject to a 2/3 voting threshold. We'll move now to Article 28, which is a definition of lot coverage. We'll see if there are any discussion, starting with Ken.
No, this is a clarification of an ambiguity of interpretation of lot coverage.
Thank you. Shayna?
Agreed. I have nothing further.
Jean?
Yeah, I'll just add that this was requested by the Chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Thank you. Steve?
Nothing further.
Great. Thank you very much. Is there a motion to recommend favorable action on Article 28, the definition of lot coverage?
So motioned.
Second.
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. We will recommend favorable action with a vote of 5-0. This is a 2/3 majority required vote. I'm also planning on recommending that this fall under the consent agenda unless there is any concern from the board.
None.
Seeing none, we'll recommend this for the consent agenda. All right, we'll move to Article 28, which is an article related to parking in the residential district.
Article 29.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much, Jean. Article 29, related to parking in the residential districts. Any discussion, starting with Ken?
None.
Shayna?
None.
Jean?
I don't have any other than to say this was also requested by the Chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals and went through 2 or 3 iterations to get to this point.
Thank you. Steve?
Yes. This article refers to Section 6110, which frequently comes up in ZBA dockets, typically requests for second driveways or alterations to non-conforming single and two-family dwellings. While I was on the ZBA, I found this section a little challenging, and I appreciate the changes suggested by the ZBA chair. And Madam Chair, if possible, I'd like to suggest that it would be nice to have the ZBA chairs available to answer questions at town meeting should they arise. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. That is an excellent suggestion, and we will contact Christian Klein to request his availability. Okay. Is there a, excuse me 1 second while I finish my notes. Is there a motion to recommend favorable action for Article 29?
So motioned.
Second.
We will take a vote, starting with Steve,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Shayna,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. We will recommend favorable action on Article 29 with a vote of 5-0. This does require a 2/3 majority voting threshold. We'll now move to Article 30, which is related to screening and buffer requirements. Any comments or discussion from Ken?
None.
Shayna?
None.
Jean?
I'll just mention we're doing this because when recodification of the bylaws took place 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, whenever it was, due to an error, the same section appeared twice in different places. So this simply removes one of the 2 sections and moves things around so it's more easily understandable. There's no substantive change.
Great, thank you. Steve?
Yeah, well, it was actually a little longer ago. I happened to be on the recodification committee,
Steve.
and it was 2018, but this was a redundancy that crept in, and, like with, it was just a case of a lot of things coming down at the end of the wire, and this wasn't taken care of at the time, and I think this is an appropriate correction. Thank you.
Thank you. That was 2018, correct, for
Yes.
codification? Just want to make sure I have that in my notes. Is there a motion to recommend favorable action for Article 30?
So motioned.
Second.
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean.
Yes.
Shayna.
Yes.
Ken.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. We will recommend favorable action with a vote of 5-0. And again, given that this is an administrative change, I would also recommend to the moderator that this appear on the consent agenda unless there is any concern from the board.
None.
Seeing none, we will make that recommendation. This is subject to a 2/3 voting threshold. The next item is Article 31, related to Redevelopment Board jurisdiction. We'll see if there is any discussion, starting with Ken.
No, I think this is a good change. I think the zoning board is best suited for these comments for residential for us. We're not really set up for that.
Great. Shayna?
I agree in hearing projects that have fit into this bucket over the past year. It's become clear that this is not truly the intent that in intent and spirit, these sorts of projects belong with the ZBA.
Great, thank you. Jean?
Agree.
Steve?
Yeah, I agree that environmental design review is an excessive requirement for single and two-family dwellings, and the ZBA would be a more appropriate special permit granting authority.
I would just
Yep.
note that ZBA has agreed that they would be appropriate.
Thank you, Shayna, for that clarification. Just update my notes here. Is there a motion to recommend favorable action for Article 31?
So motioned.
Second.
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. We will recommend favorable action on Article 31 with a vote of 5-0. This is subject to a 2/3 voting majority. And I will also recommend that this be placed on the consent agenda. Next, we have Article 32, which is the first of two warrant articles related to the rezoning of the B1 parcels. This would make the change in the zoning bylaws. Article 33 would make the change in the zoning map. So let's start with Article 32 for any discussion, starting with Ken.
No, I think this is a great article. It puts outdated zoning and encourages commercial and business in the correct zones.
Great. Shayna?
Agreed.
Jean?
I agree. I have one request for the staff, that the list of parcels not be an exhibit, but that they be right after the article, and that the excerpts of the use tables be an exhibit, because I think it would be more helpful for town meeting to have the parcels listed right after the warrant article and not in an exhibit at the end.
Steve?
So, yeah, I think we've gotten a number of pieces of favorable feedback from B1 property owners. B2A offers, I think, a more favorable set of dimensional regulations, and it permits a wider range of commercial uses. I hope this will lead to some new investment, which will expand the tax base.
And commercial property.
Yeah.
Thank you. Fantastic. Is there a motion to recommend favorable action for Article 32?
So motioned.
Second.
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. We will recommend favorable action on Article 32. Note that this is subject to a simple majority, and this will appear on the regular agenda. We'll now move to Article 33, which is the zoning map adoption for the B1 rezoning. Any discussion, starting with Ken?
None.
Shayna?
None.
Jean?
None.
Okay. Steve?
None.
Oh, can I ask, I don't know if it came up here, question last time was, did we have to use the date? And it looks like you didn't, so that's good, because that will keep the bylaw current. Great, thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Jean. All right. Is there a motion to recommend favorable action for Article 33?
So motioned.
Second.
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. We will recommend favorable action on Article 33 with a vote of 5-0. This is also subject to a simple majority. We'll move now to Article 34, which is an administrative correction. We'll start any discussion with Ken.
None here.
Shayna?
None here.
Jean?
I'm glad the date's not required anymore. It certainly makes it better. Thank you.
Steve?
I'm also glad, because now we won't have to forget it anymore.
Okay.
And it's always not going to be a year behind either.
Yep. Due to the approval process, that's why it is typically a year behind.
Right.
I think that's an important clarification to make in the report as well. By AG here. Great. Is there a motion to recommend favorable action for Article 34?
So motioned.
Second.
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. We will recommend favorable action for Article 34. Due to the subject of this map, this is subject to a simple majority. And I will also recommend that this live on the consent agenda since it is a date change only. We'll now move to Article, let me pull this up. Article 35, which is the zoning map adoption for the administrative correction. And any discussion, starting with Ken.
I have none.
Shayna?
None.
Jean?
I have none.
Steve?
Nothing.
Great. We will now see if there is a motion to recommend favorable action for Article 35.
So motioned.
Second,
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve,
Yes.
Jean,
yes.
Shayna,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. We'll recommend favorable action with a vote of 5-0. Again, same topic. This is a simple majority, and we will recommend this for the consent agenda, since it is just a date change. Okay, we'll now move to Article 36, which is an article related to no net loss of commercial space for local business. This is a citizen petition that was placed in front of the board, and we will start the discussion with Ken.
I do have issues with this article. I think it's a little too restrictive. I agree with the intent of trying to encourage commercial space development, but I think this article here will hinder that. That's my opinion.
Do you have specific areas that you'd like to highlight that you feel are too restrictive?
I think.
Or is it overall?
I think overall, I think
Okay.
some of the things here are just kind of vague. Where they say they encourage second floor development. I mean, just saying you're encouraging, it doesn't really encourage it. You have to put something in a pot for that to happen. Putting the criteria of the percentage of transparency and spaces, that's also, I think, a little too restrictive. I think
transparency was already in there. The only changes are, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
that's about it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ken. Shayna?
I also had some concerns about the restrictiveness of this, most specifically 5A2, with commercial space being located on the second level. I'll just read it. Commercial space no dwelling units may be located on the street level unless all of the following conditions are met. And then, condition 2 is a commercial space is located on the second level with floor area equal to or exceeding that of any street level dwelling units. I think that becomes pretty rigid. Does not necessarily allow for the uniqueness of each building and each development, especially where you may see the need for accessible units, and especially where the demand for upper level commercial may not be well established.
Thank you. Jean?
I have some technical and policy problems with this. First, I'll say I'm sympathetic to what this is trying to do, and this board has always tried to maximize the amount of commercial space that has been on the ground floor of a building consistent with getting the development done. So I am sympathetic to that. So here are some of my technical problems. So the actual article itself speaks of set a required minimum floor area percentage. But if you look at 5A, there's no minimum floor area percentage. Now, we don't get to make the decision about whether that's out of scope or not, but I do think 5A is probably out of scope. Second is, it's not clear when the first part, the 5A, has specific requirements for all mixed-use projects. And then 5B has projects of 4 or more stories, which contradicts parts of 5A, which says they apply to all projects. So I think they don't line up, and it's not clear when 5A applies to 5B. Second is, I'm concerned about the 5B requiring to 4 or more stories, because I feel like one of the unintended consequences could be saying, well, if that's the case, I'll just build 2 or 3 story buildings, because I don't want to do a 4-story building. So I'm really concerned, and I think what we're trying to do is not have just 2 and 3 story buildings on Mass Ave. So I'm afraid that this would have the unintended consequence of at least incentivizing some people to build lower than they would otherwise. I'm also a little concerned about the phrase in BI that says, or areas not open to the general public, because even if you have a commercial space, there's going to be some of the commercial space that's not open to the general public. For example, they might be bathrooms or showers in the commercial space that aren't open to the general public. There probably will need to be long-term bicycle parking for the staff that's not open to the general public. So by putting in our areas not open to the general public, it really distorts the 60%, and I think it doesn't work. And I agree with my colleagues. I think this is too restrictive, and as we said the last time this was here, each one of the buildings is unique. You know, the parcels are unique. What they're proposing to do is unique, and I think this makes it too difficult to deal with these are unique projects. Also, as I said last time, we have projects going on to go to town meeting next year for rezoning of Arlington Heights and for Mass Ave, you know, in parts of East Arlington. And I think that would be a great place to plug in and to see if you can get these concepts into what the rezoning is going to be for those 2 areas, rather than try to put this through for the whole town now. So that's where I am on it. Sorry.
Steve?
Yeah, the way I read it, I see the main motion trying to do basically 2 things. One would be a requirement for 60% of the building footprint to be commercial space in mixed-use buildings of 4 stories or more. And there's some restrictions on how that space can be split between the first and second floors. The second is it places restrictions on first floor residential, which vary by building size. So as drafted, I do think that these elements, you know, have some odd interactions. And the one case that came to mind was, you know, a 3-story building that had 60% commercial GFA on the first floor, and along with an accessible unit, where, you know, the building would be too short to trigger the requirement for 60% GFA, but it's meeting it, so it's meeting the intent. And now you have a first floor unit which requires the addition of some commercial space which may or may not necessarily fit into the building. I could be supportive of something simpler if it were just like 60% without restricting how that space was divided among floors and without the extra restrictions on the ground floor. You know, a lot of the proposals that have come before our board that have incorporated ground floor units, they've been accessible units, and I don't want to discourage that. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I agree. I think I really appreciate the intent of this. Jean, I appreciate also the comment that you made, which was something that I hadn't contemplated before, which was about, you know, does this encourage 2 or 3 story buildings instead of 4-story buildings in the way that this is written? I think that as this was coming together, I think it got more complex and more complex, which is a challenge in the zoning bylaw, which is, I think, part of what some of my colleagues in the board are reacting to. I would really like to see, to the point that was made earlier, how some of these concepts can be woven into the the business district requirements that are going to be developed to be brought before 2026 town meeting. And I think, again, because this has been workshopped so much too, one of the things that I'm struggling with, to Jean's point, is some of the when is this, when do you apply A versus B, and the way that it's written, that it applies to all mixed-use projects, including new construction and redevelopment, which is in conflict with the applicability in section B2 above, which does have carve-outs for when this is not applicable, this section of the bylaw. But I really do appreciate the intent. I think especially in mixed-use projects for 4 stories or more, being able to find an alternate path to creating business uses that are not solely on the first floor because of the space that I think there have been some really great examples, and I know you're well aware of them, of when some of the building program unfortunately does eat into what may have in a 1-story development been primarily commercial space. So I again really applaud the intent, and I think that there is a way to simplify this and move this into the zoning in the future, taking the comments from my fellow board members into account. Any other discussion before we make a motion?
No.
Okay. It sounds like this is moving towards a vote of no action. So is there a motion for a vote of no action on Article 36?
Motion for no action on Article 36.
Second.
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean.
Yes.
Shayna.
Yes.
Ken.
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. So we will, the redevelopment board will vote no action on Article 36. And with a vote of no action, those become recommended for the consent agenda as well. Thank you again.
Thank you for the additional input.
Thank you. All right, let's move to Article 37, which is related to multifamily parking reduction, and we will start the discussion with Ken.
This one here I'm on the fence with. I think we first talked about it. I think the proponent has simplified this quite a bit and made it a little less restrictive and not as complicated. So I will leave it. I will leave it to the fact that I'm on the fence about this right now, and see what the other board members have to say. And maybe I'll come back and give an opinion.
Okay, Shayna.
So I'm also a little bit on the fence about this. I really appreciate how the proponent has simplified this and heard the feedback and tried to narrow it. The one place I'm getting caught up is with on-street parking. I think the structure or the proposed structure for the on-street parking is a very good one. We don't have on-street parking in Arlington now. We have the pilot. We're probably going to have on-street parking, maybe permanently. And so I could see this language as prescient or forward-looking, I suppose, depending on what my colleagues are interested in. I would be comfortable moving forward, sort of understanding that this couldn't necessarily, that the on-street parking element would not necessarily be usable yet. But I like where it ended up with notwithstanding the fact that we're still trying to work out on-street parking here in Arlington.
Great, thank you, Shayna. Jean?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for paring this back quite a bit to something that I think is much more workable. I really appreciate that. It's my understanding, and I don't know if anybody can confirm this on the board, that the select board did approve overnight on-street parking recently.
Yes. On the 24th, the board made the pilot permanent.
Then I withdraw all my comments.
So do we know how
However,
many?
there's nothing yet that's been published about it.
Correct.
So that's my challenge right now.
Yeah, so I would support this with some wording changes in E. I think there are two wording changes that I'd be interested in. So the first one is on the fourth line where it says are located within 1,000 feet. I'd like it to say 1,000 feet walk of the building, because it could be something where the entrance, of walk of the entrance of the building, the entrance could be on one street, but to get to the parking places, it's sort of as the crow flies. So I'd be interested in that change. I'd be also interested in the parenthetical that has the such as, to add snow emergency bans, because if the town is going to allow on-street parking, but then ban it in the winter for snow emergencies, then people aren't going to have a place to park. So with those two changes, I could support this, but I will point something out that I think makes this difficult to implement, and I'm sort of interested in what my colleagues have to say about this. I like the concept is if the on-street spaces are available within, X distance, and I like that it doesn't change the requirement for accessible parking spaces at the property. But what concerns me is after you say yes 2 or 3 times, who's counting where the spaces are on the street so we know if those spaces are still available? So I think, the first time maybe or the second time that this is done in an area, it's going to be pretty easy. But the third and fourth and fifth time, who's going to be counting, how much do these spaces overlap, and are the spaces still available? So I think that's the one concern I have about going forward with this concept, and I am interested in what others think about that.
Thank you, Jean. Steve?
Yeah, this, to respond to Mr. Benson's question, I mean, procedurally, I could see that being handled in 2 ways. The select board would be, or the select board office, I understand, issues the overnight parking permits. So we could, as part of, it's just part of the prep for hearing, ask, are there spaces available here? Or in our conditions, we could make it contingent. You have to do this subject to, space availability or, something else. I think it's manageable, but on the idea as a whole, I do like the idea of including cargo bike parking as a TDM measure. I bought my cargo bike when the frame rod on my pickup truck was starting to get bad, and when it finally failed inspection, I found that I didn't need to buy a new vehicle. So they are, at least in my case, and I know others as well, other people as well, it is a practical automobile alternative. Yeah, I am supportive of this. I do realize that there's some gray area around the on-street parking, and if that's a sticking point, perhaps we might offer a friendly amendment to, take that section out. But I don't see a problem with leaving it in. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree with you, Steve. I think that I appreciate the addition of the cargo bike parking as a TDM measure. Because nothing has been published yet with regard to the select board's conversion of the overnight parking pilot program to a permanent program, which I'm very excited about, in terms of the number of spaces that will be available, et cetera. I'm hopeful that this section will be something that we can use to more comprehensively look at parking requirements in the bylaw in general. My question is whether we feel that this is the article to move that forward in, or whether with that change, is there a more wholesale look at the parking requirements that is warranted, which I wanted to throw out to your to your topic around, is this jumping forward a bit? And, I do think that the cargo bike parking is a great addition, but I'm not sure if we're, if it makes more sense to more comprehensively look at what on-street parking does for our bylaw.
To be completely frank, I think it would warrant, I think a conversation with the select board would be appropriate to just say that, we would like to consider the availability of off-street parking now that you've made the pilot permanent, and what do you feel is the best way to go about doing so?
Jean?
I guess a couple of things. The amendment to 6.1.5, I think only works if there's on-street overnight parking. So I just want to say that my agreement with that part of it was subject to the fact that there was on-street overnight parking. And I'm sort of not convinced about either of Steve's ways to deal with the, how do you deal with when there's too much overnight parking? And it seems to me almost like the only way to do it is every time it was approved, somebody would have to place it on a map and write a circle and see where the spaces are, and the next time it's approved, place it on a map and see if it overlaps with the spaces. So that's my only other concern. I think there are ways to deal with it, not either the ways that Mr. Revelak does, but there's a workaround to deal with it. Again, if the select board ends up not publishing it and not going ahead with on-street overnight parking, then I have a problem with the amendment to 6.1.5. If they do go ahead and we can put in the two changes I asked for in E, I would be supportive of this with the understanding that it's going to be clunky in the long run to deal with what to do with how do you count the spaces on the street. Because, let me just say one other thing. As used to know folks who lived in Boston with a car, and sometimes, they were driving 5 or 6 or 7 times around the block, et cetera, and trying to find a place to park and parking far away. I think this deals with it somewhat, but not completely.
Vince, did you have a clarification?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Vincent Baudouin, 70 Silk Street. So I agree that talking to the select board is a great approach, but I thought I could offer a couple of additional details on the overnight parking program that might be relevant. During snow emergencies, the town assigns a spot in one of the town's off-street parking lots to residents, and they're required to park there so that the street is clear for snow clearing. So they might have farther to walk, but the car would be off the street, and they do have a place to park. The select board, when they voted to make the program permanent, they also agreed to keep the details the same for now. It's the same price, the same number of permits. And there's an interesting detail that the program is limited to 1 permit per household or 2 permits per apartment building, which I think puts a nice natural limit on the number of spaces that would be substituted. The applicant would need to put the details in a plan that they would present to the reviewing authority. The distance of 1,000 feet, I didn't add the walking distance language just because the previous section, which refers to off-street parking lots, didn't have that language, and I thought it would be cleaner if it were consistent. But I would imagine it would be within the board's power to review the distance, and if it proved to be a difficult distance to walk, you might be able to not accept those spaces.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Do you know how many parking lot spaces would be available if there was a ban on off-street parking for snow? Like, I'm just wondering what the upper limit is.
The town has the Russell Common Lot and the Railroad Lot, and I believe the Russell Common Lot has at least 300 spaces. The Railroad Lot maybe less than 100. But currently the number of permits is about, I think it's fixed at 125, of which only 100 are purchased. So at this point, there's no capacity issue.
Thank you.
You said that the select board had set it at 1 permit per household or 2 per apartment building. Is that the greater of, or, let's say you have a 40-unit apartment building. Are we talking max 40 permits, max 2 permits?
My understanding is it's maximum 2 per apartment building.
Okay.
Thank you. Again, I think I'm fine with the changes to 6.1.5C and 6.1.12, but given that we had a discussion with the select board about overnight parking and our desire to more comprehensively look at parking minimums and parking maximums, once that change was made, I think it would behoove us to follow up at our next joint meeting and come up with a more comprehensive approach. That's my feeling on 6.1.10. Other thoughts?
Well, I would be okay with taking the proposed changes to 615C and so adding cargo bikes and the cargo bike standards in 6112F. If the proponent is amenable.
Well, I think that I would prefer to see all 3 go through, like I think Ms. Corman-Houston said, the on-street parking is an option for the special permit reviewing authority. It's also one that if the overnight parking permit program were ever suspended or canceled, then this section would simply not apply. So it really doesn't seem like it's opening the floodgates per se. It merely gives you an option to consider in certain circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you. Jean?
So I appreciated your giving us some other information about how the select board has set this up. And I'm just a little concerned that the wording of E, doesn't quite line up with what the select board has done, because this just says substitution of on-street parking places on a public way, where we're really talking about it's based on the number of permits that the select board is giving out rather than the number of on-street parking places. So I think the metric in here isn't the right metric based upon how it looks the select board's gone for that. So it would probably be better, and it's hard to wordsmith this on the spot and be comfortable with it. It could be better allow the substitution, or reduce the number of required parking spaces by the number of on-street parking permits provided by the select board. But we would need a little time to massage the language here, but I think that would be better wording than this, because this just sort of assumes, oh, you want to park on the street? Here's a permit. Go park on the street. As opposed to there's a limit per household and there's a limit per building. So, yeah, I have a little concern about how this is now written, and I know you're going to say, well, you don't have to really do more, but the problem is it's not in here that the limit's based on the number of permits given out, and I can see that becoming a problem. So I have that concern about it.
I don't know if I have a second to respond.
Let me just see what Ken has to add to that.
I'm sort of now hearing what the comments of my regular board members. I appreciate the effort on what you did here. And I think what this is trying to do is encourage development in commercial zones and also housing by reducing required parking. And as someone would look into this, it's still a little too vague right now, or it can go one way or the other. That the intended outcome, what you're trying to do, is make it more, encouraging for more development. But when someone looks at this, it's still a little on the vague side, and saying if there's, if you can count on this or you can not count on this, I think I would sort of tend to lean to right now with the rest of my board members and say, look, maybe we can bring this back the next time around. And I would say that I would encourage a promise that at least on our part, that the ARB would bring it up ourselves. So, because I know it was quite a bit of work on your part, but I think this would, I would say that I would like to commit this as one of the agenda items for ourselves to address next session, because I don't think this is quite ready yet right now for the intended use. And that's my opinion, okay?
Yeah, I'll just add as well that, I have concerns with reducing down to 25% if, again, and part of this is we haven't seen the written proposal and documentation from the select board, and I did look for that today, so I know it's not published. But going down to 25% if only 2 spots per apartment building will be granted, given, again, not having any limits on the size of, the development that this would be applied to. I still think that there's work to be done to make sure we're right-sizing this. Jean?
Yeah, I have the same concern about 6.1.5. I don't think we're there considering the limited number of permits that are available per building. However, I think we could easily rewrite E to say that for multifamily housing developments, the Board of Appeals or Redevelopment Board, as applicable, might reduce the required number of parking spaces by the number of overnight parking permits available for the development and where the on-street spaces are located within 1,000 feet of a building, ... So I think that's an easy way to do E. I would not like the changes to 6.1.5 for the reasons you just cited. I like the cargo bike. I think we can make that change to on-street parking because then the reduction would be directly tied to the number of overnight parking permits for the development, available to the development, and located within 1,000 feet. So I think we could easily rewrite E as I suggested and make that work. So I'd get rid of the overall, part of 6.1.5. I'd leave in the cargo bikes. I'd rewrite E as I suggested.
But Gene, don't we already have the ability to reduce parking right now based on our judgment on certain criterias? This thing here is trying to do as of right and so that it would encourage more development.
I don't think, I think the difference is, all right, I'm not going to remember the zoning bylaw exactly right, so watch me make a mistake. But I think we don't have the authority for multifamily housing, let's say in the R2, R3, R4 zones, because if you look at the top, it's R5, R6, R7, business and industrial zones. So there's a space there where we don't have the authority to do that. But I would delete that, the changes that are proposed up there for the other reasons we said. But yeah, this is a little place where there'd be some more authority given with some standards attached, as I suggested.
If I may, the intent.
But if you all want to wait for next
Yeah,
year, I'm comfortable with that too.
I'm concerned with wordsmithing that much and not looking, not tying this, having the time to tie this back to the different sections of the zoning bylaw more comprehensively.
and I
with
think we'd-
wordsmithing it that much.
And if we were going to do this right, we'd also look at exactly what the select board policy is when it comes out in writing.
Yeah.
Would the rest of the board be comfortable saying that we do make a promise that we will bring this up ourselves next year around? Because we think this is important enough?
I would agree.
I'm willing to make that commitment.
Parking comprehensively, absolutely, and parking reductions, yeah.
Dependent on, again, what we see as the final, again, that will have to hinge on what exactly is, has been approved by the select board.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's always worth taking a look at. I wouldn't make a commitment that we would change it because over the past few years, we've reduced the number of required parking spaces. So it's now 1 per unit, which is pretty consistent with what MAPC's research finds is needed. And I think it's worth looking at this again, but I don't want to make a commitment that we're going to really do something beyond looking.
No, but we will look at
Because-
it and address
yeah.
it. I'm not
Well,
saying
look
we're
at
gonna
it,
pass something. That's not-
look
that's
at it
not the
again.
promise.
And I think depending how the select board rolls out the on-street parking, it does give us the opportunity to do some other things.
Great. I just added that to my 2026.
Or I would like to see us commit to cargo bikes.
Yeah,
I can
Yes.
get behind the cargo bike.
Yeah.
Again, if the proponent is, if you'd be willing to limit this to the 2 sections that relate to cargo bikes.
Well, that seems like a substantial revision to make at this point. I think that if the board, well, you've already voted on your own TDM article, but it might be most appropriate to introduce that as an amendment at town meeting. Thank you.
Okay. So if the preference is to not move this forward if we don't have the overnight, the parking reduction, and just the cargo bikes, then, I think I would not be in favor of moving this forward this year, and to Ken's point, speaking more comprehensively about parking reductions as we lead up to 2026. Is
agree. I
there
agree
someone
with you.
who would like to make a motion?
I'd like the motion of no action on this Article 37.
On Article 37? Is there?
second,
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
yes.
Shayna?
Yes,
Ken?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. So we will vote no action on Article 37. Thank you.
Thank you for the work.
All right. Our next article is Article 38 for use regulations for the residential districts. And I will turn this over to Ken. This, just to continue to introduce this, this is a citizen petition that was submitted by Andrew Greenspan.
I'm on the fence on this one, too. I'm going to withhold my comments right now to see what the rest of the board says.
Okay, Sheena.
I think this is I appreciate this article and what it's attempting to do. I think that where it speaks to office uses and some of the retail uses, it makes sense to me. But I have concerns about some of the other uses that it proposes to move into residential or to permit in residential districts.
Thank you, Shayna. Jean?
Well, number one, I appreciate how the proponent has come back with a much more limited and focused proposal. What I'd be interested in knowing is how, and this is now basically the parcels in the R3, R4, R5, R6, R7 districts, and I'd be interested in knowing, number one, like how many parcels are we talking about? You know, how many properties is this changing? Second is, I'm concerned about the potential loss of residential units by allowing these in the residential zones, and even the possibility of people taking a residence and either replacing it with something like this, you know, with one of these classes of uses, or tearing it down and building, you know, a small health club or something like that. And while we want to have more commercial space in town, and we've all been trying to figure out how to do that and move in that direction, we also don't want to lose and want to increase the residential properties in town. And I'm concerned, and I don't know, but potentially this is a loss of residential properties, as things now used as residences would get converted to other uses. There are a couple other things I'll just mention. You know, it's interesting how, I'm sorry to go on this aside, but when this came up last time, someone here in the audience spoke and said, you know, when it's restaurants, you have to look and see if the sewer system has capacity in the particular line for restaurant waste, because what might be good in, you know, a commercial area, if the pipes are bigger, isn't so good in a residential area if you have smaller sewer pipes. And I don't really have any idea what the capacity, you know, in diameter of the sewer pipes are in the town, but there's clearly the possibility to get a lot more foodstuffs and fats, oils, and greases, known in the trade as fog, coming out of restaurants than you do out of other places. And it's sort of not clear to me whether putting the potential for a restaurant of, you know, 1,499 square feet in some of these residential districts will stress the sewer system or not. I just really don't know. Maybe the proponent's spoken with Mike Rademacher and knows the answer to that. The other thing I'll point out from a particularly technical point of view in the office uses, in an existing building originally designed, they're now the exact same. So you don't have to have two separate columns or rows for those. There can just be one row, and you don't need to have the amount of the right-of-way. The other thing that sort of bothers me is there are a couple places where we would be allowing things in the residential districts as of right, but they require a special permit in the business districts, and that seems backwards, to me at least, to allow that. And I just wonder whether the real way to go about doing some of this is to look and see if it's possible to change where we currently allow occupations as an accessory use under the zoning bylaw, which is a completely different part of this than the proponent has done. So with the concern about capacity of the restaurants and with concern about trying to get an estimate of how many residential units we could end up losing for this, and the concern about places that are as of right but require a special permit, and the need to combine the two office units, there's something workable here. I just think it needs work.
Thank you, Jean. Steve?
So I'll have more to say about this during new business, but last week we had the comprehensive plan kickoff. And a couple of the details that our colleagues at Stantec shared were that first, of the residents in Arlington who work, 26% of them work from home. And the other was that, Arlington has added 250 businesses and 1,300 employees since 2013. And a lot of these businesses are getting started in people's homes. So, I get the sense that there's already a lot of business being done in residential districts today, but, it just might be underground, and we don't necessarily, people working out of their houses, maybe they have an employee, maybe they don't. But I do think it's happening. I really appreciate what the applicant is trying to do here. I mean, decades ago, we got the idea of having these really strict separations of uses. So you put your residential over here, you put your job centers over here, you put your shopping and amenities over here, and then you spend all of your time in transit from one to the other and back again. With the by the removal of R0, R1, and R2, this is scaled back significantly. R3, R4, and R3 through R7 in total are tiny, and a lot of those parcels are already located on Mass Ave and Broadway. And my biggest reservation, or I'll call it a disappointment. At the hearing for this, I mentioned that, of all the places that I've lived in Massachusetts, Arlington had the least number of commercial amenities, and it's the furthest I have to walk to get to a corner store. This would not allow a corner store to be put anywhere closer. I think it is a very small and incremental change, but I still support it nonetheless.
Thank you, Steve. I think I was a bit surprised to see what some of the uses were that were included as of right, given some of the feedback that was given at the hearing, such as catering services with 5 or more employees, creative production, with 5 or fewer employees. And we talked about a very different scale, and scaling this back to businesses that were specifically one to two folks, without a significant number of employees. So there were a few of these, that including restaurant uses, the 5 or fewer employees that I think are that were not in alignment with the feedback that was given, and I do think that some of the smaller incremental, even in the single-family districts that we had talked about during the hearing, for somebody with a small accounting business, or somebody with a neighborhood artistic and creative production business. That's what I was expecting to see when this came back. So I still think that there's a great idea here, but I'm not yet seeing it fully in this article. Can
I suggest a compromise here? Which actually would get me off the fence. If we were to delete restaurants from this use and make all the other ones work, I think that would get me over the hump here. The only thing that I had a question on were an under office use. On the higher R4 and R5, you say it used to be special permit, and now you're saying it's as of right. I would suggest that maybe we can put the R3 or R as special permit, and all the other ones as of right, just to say that it gives us an ability to review if it's an awkward fit in the R3 areas. I think I agree with Steve. The R4, 5, 6, and 7s are pretty much limited and around Mass Ave. But some of the R3s do go pretty deep into the neighborhoods, especially in East Arlington. And having some of the stuff right in the middle of the street might be a little awkward, and having that as a special permit. So if those two considerations were changed, the deletion of the restaurant and making the R3 special permit, I think I might be able to support this.
Jean?
I think there are three separate things going on here. One is, some to allow people to theoretically do some things in their home. A second is to allow real businesses like restaurants and catering services and artistic creative production and a few other, medical clinics, things like that in residential districts. So it's like an amalgam of different things. And it doesn't get at some of the things that I think you were talking about, Steve, which is people who want to start a business in their house, but at some point the business is going to outgrow their house, and we don't want all of a sudden to have, 5 employees and 1,500 square feet of business in their house. At that point, they need to be in the business district. As I think I mentioned last time, and if I didn't, I should have, I think the alternative way to have done this is to have amended 5.10.1, which is home occupation, and to have expanded that a little bit. So instead of having no resident employed there, you might have 1 or 2, So there could have been something done there to better say, okay, if you want to start a business in your house, you can do it under these criteria. But I think this is too much of a mix and match at this point.
Yep. Did we have any questions for the proponent?
Yeah, he has his hand up. I'd
Okay.
be interested in hearing what he has
Screen's
to
fine.
say.
If you would like to join us here at the front.
Yeah, I can sort of answer some of the questions that came up.
Great. I'm sorry. If you could just please introduce
Andrew
yourself.
Greenspan, 89 Palmer Street,
Thank you.
proponent of the article. So to be frank, at the prior hearing, I was given many mixed messages, and I was trying to process them all. It seemed like there were some who suggested I should just do home occupations, and others who said I should focus on places where there's already business. So I picked that. I think there is a warrant article someone should do for home occupations, but it is not this right now. I went through the ArcGIS repeatedly. I am fairly certain almost all R3 through R7 are abutting business on main arterials or within a block or two. So that is the point of this one, that these are filling in our gaps in business areas. So that was the motivation. Some of the questions asked, I did a quick check of parcel counts. R3 through R7 is approximately 15% of all our parcels.
Do you know what number that is?
Sorry, what do you mean?
Like, what's
Quantity.
the total number of?
Oh, of parcels? The total number of R3 through R7 parcels I found, it might be slightly adjusted, but in the database is about 1,900.
1,900?
Yeah. Answering a couple other questions here. The restaurant one, I did take Kin's advice. So the restaurant one is only if it already abuts a business zone. So in terms of questions of piping and whatnot, it's only parcels that are already abutting business zones. So it will be much less. But I'm also amenable to friendly amendments. Just check. I understand the issue of concerns about residential being converted to business. I'm making an assumption that most of these parcels, not all of them, are probably existing apartment or condo associations and can't be completely taken apart. Most of them probably can't, honestly, but it would allow one person, if their condo docs would have to allow it, right? So there's zoning, but even if zoning allowed it, probably a lot of these, it wouldn't be allowed because I have my condo docs. I know what's allowed and not allowed. So that's already a existing limitation for the private people of their homes if they have concerns there. I did talk to Mike Giampa about this, and I think as Steve pointed out, there probably are, it appears there probably are many existing businesses in a gray area that would be good if we could legalize. I wasn't given particularly a lot of direction on employees. I think Gene last time said he was concerned about 30 people going into a building. I mean, I'm amenable to changes, but I think 5 is a good balance for parcels that are already next to businesses, so it's not adding a lot of people to existing areas that have business. Regarding uses that have special permit in B zones, I'm amenable to adjusting it to be consistent, to have those be special permit for consistency. Similarly, like R3, amenable to special permit. The neighborhood creative use I did change because there was a concern about manufacturing.
Right.
It's a new definition, so it doesn't allow any manufacturing welding. It's purely like arts, theater, tech things. That was to limit potential issues. Catering, I personally think is, as the board wants, but I don't think catering is a particularly intensive use, much less than a restaurant, but if friendly amendment if you all want to change things to special permit. So I think those, maybe I'm happy to answer more questions, but I'm open to changes.
Great, thank you very much. Jean?
I should mention two other pieces related to the restaurants. I know that Andy and I both spoke with the general counsel about whether having something in the our district, whether you can do it or not, depends if it abuts a business and whether that violates uniformity. And what the town council said to me is, maybe not, but it's hard to know what the AG's office would really do with it if it got there. He said there were a few cases, but and I haven't read any of them, and the cases are not particularly on point for this issue. But it looks like there's a little bit of a loose reading by the courts of what uniformity means, but it's still a bit of a question about that. So as to the sewers, I'm still concerned about that because here's what I do know. The MWRA has a sewer main that runs down Mass Ave, and the Mass Ave buildings all get to connect in every few of them, but when you get to the side streets, then it's the smaller town sewer lines that have to make the way down. So if this were a building that was on Mass Ave or Broadway, I'm going to guess it's probably going to have one of those direct connections. But if it's a building that's off Mass Ave and Broadway, and maybe it goes into the side street sewer, we don't really know, I'm not sure what to make of that, but, it is a concern. The other thing I'll mention related to restaurants, in a way, I'm not sure exactly how to say this, so I'll say it the only way I can think of it right now, Andy. This is like choosing, I think, the wrong vehicle for a couple of things, right? I think the right vehicle for one thing would have been to do some amendment to the home occupation thing so people can sort of feel comfortable doing a bit more, and there are clearly some ways to do that. The other way to do it, and it's something that I think the board is probably going to do in Arlington Heights and East Arlington, is say, hey, maybe some of those residential parcels should be rezoned business, right? So in a way, this might be a year premature, because in a year from now, we may be ready to go to town meeting with, some of those R parcels should be redone as B. I don't know, because we're not anywhere down that road yet. But I don't want to be critical, because you spent a lot of time looking at this and then redoing it, and I appreciate all of that. But I just think there were two different paths, other than this one, that could have been taken.
Madam Chair?
Steve, yes.
I was actually a little surprised to hear town council's take on the uniform districts provision, just due to the number of cases in our existing bylaw where, the rules depend on the proximity of one district to another.
It's pretty surprising, isn't it? Yeah, and you don't know how many of those were sort of non-conforming, which they just threw in there, so they might have an excuse, but I have no idea, Steve.
Gene, I think you're concerned about infrastructure being able to support, let's say, a restaurant, okay? We can always change, if he wants to change it, provided that the infrastructure will be adequate to support that, and then that would make it go away.
Mm-hmm.
All right?
Right.
I personally don't think it's that much of an issue, because most of the lines that are in the street right now were done in the early 40s and 50s. And I know that back then, you were allowed to put your roof drainage, all your drainage into the sewer system. Now it's all separated.
It's not that, it's the different sort of waste that comes out of restaurants, especially if they use friolators or something like that.
Grease trap is
And
one
the
way
grease
to
trap
word
is
it.
was required, and
Right,
you don't dump the grease in there.
Having once worked for a sewer agency, I can tell you there are numerous times when the grease traps aren't cleaned sufficiently, or they overtop, and
Yes.
Yeah.
You can't.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm not gonna disagree with you there. Okay.
No, so, right, so I don't know what to do with it, because I don't know, whether the infrastructure can support it or not. Right, so, yeah, we could put something in like that.
So, I think I still have a challenge with the number, and again, I mentioned this at the original hearing, with the number of employees that we have in these areas. I agree, Jean, I think that trying to create an opportunity within these residential buildings, I mean, a catering, I've designed plenty of catering kitchen, and a catering kitchen with 5 employees, there are many large retail or restaurants that, that's no different than a restaurant kitchen at that point. That's to me too large for this, especially by right, not by special permit. And a fitness club with 5 employees, I think these are much larger than what I had anticipated or would feel comfortable adding, especially in the R3 district, as of right.
So, can I,
Yep.
I think our concern is, let's say, restaurants and catering, if the proponent is okay to take those out.
Sure.
No, I'm just giving you a list, I'm
Oh,
not telling you what to do.
Sorry,
okay?
sorry. Let me know when it's my turn. I'm sorry.
And then, under the R3 category, where it's as of right, put that down as a special permit. And then, we can have a discussion of, is that appropriate in that area there or not? And I sort of disagree with you a little bit. There are some R3s that are not adjacent to Mass Ave. They are a little further in, a couple
They
blocks
are.
in. Okay, just so, but that's, but the 4s and 5s and 6s and 7s are pretty close to the business districts. Okay, so I would be comfortable with that, with those two changes. Deletion of the restaurants and catering and making the R3 special permit. I might be okay to move this ahead for the town to decide, but I'll leave it up to the rest of the board, see what they think.
I still have a problem with 5 employees in the R3 and any.
Can I get a clarification from what you're suggesting?
Sure.
And so there are many of the proposed uses for R3 are as of right, as are R4, R5, R6, R7, and only very few of them are, only one of them actually is special permit. Are you suggesting that in the R3, all of the uses would be by special permit?
Correct.
Okay, so your suggestion, if I understand it, is delete catering service, delete
Restaurants.
restaurant, and have all of the R3 be special permit.
Correct.
Okay, got it, I understand.
That's my suggestion. I'm not saying that's.
I know, I'm just trying to,
I'm not even sure he's going to accept that.
right, I'm just trying to understand what
Okay.
your suggestion was, thank you.
Steve?
I have nothing further.
Jean?
Well, I'm intrigued by Kim's suggestion. I just wonder, Rachel, what would you put as the limit on the number of employees in the R districts? I know it's a hard question to
It's a hard
answer.
question because, again, I think this is a very different proposal than I think the intent originally
Right.
was. And
sure.
and I think it's a very different proposal than I think is what is actually the need in Arlington, which is for those small startup home businesses that have 1 or 2 employees that then move to the business district. So I'm having trouble with the concept as a whole, which, is consistent with what I had indicated previously.
Yeah, and I also wonder how much, how much do we need to convert residences to businesses for barbershops, hair salons, shoe repair shops? There's that issue which I raised earlier, which is which one of these do we really need to feel comfortable about in saying, oh yeah, we're willing to potentially lose some residences because there's not enough space otherwise for a barber shop, a hair salon, a tailor, a shoe repair shop, or, so for some of them, they fit in that area where I'm not sure the balance is struck the right way on those sorts of things. And again, I fall back to the idea that if we want people to have a little more flexibility to start businesses in their homes and do a little more out of their homes, we should be amending 5.10.1, which is home occupation, rather than this for that piece. And if this is to starting to allow businesses in the R districts, where's the trade-off? How many did you say, Andy? About 1,900 parcels with residents on them, And and all of those parcels, or most of them, are going to be multifamily if in the R3, R4, or 5, or 6, or 7. So some of them clearly are not going to get changed because they're like public housing or condos, as you point out. But those that are still owned by one owner and rented out, they're more likely to be lost. And I'm concerned about that if we're losing them to things that there are other places in town. In the last couple of years, I think at least 2 or 3 barbershops and hair salons have opened, along Mass Ave and Broadway. So it's not like we need to allow them in residential, in places that are now residences. So I'm concerned about that. I'm sort of leaning, there are a lot of good ideas here, and I like Ken's suggestion, but I'm sort of leaning toward there's too much possibility on residences being lost, and it would be better to come back next year with something that figures out what to do 5.10.1 home occupation for home occupations. And meanwhile, and we said this on the proposal for commercial, is, hey, we've got this ongoing process for Arlington Heights and East Arlington business rezoning. Plug it in there. Are there resident parcels there, or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, where it might make sense to do business, and it might make better sense to do business because we might end up with mixed use rather than just something like this. So Ken, I like your suggestion, but I'm sort of leaning toward what I suggested instead.
No, I'm on the fence too. I was just trying to make compromises.
Yeah.
Great. Yes, one
I
more
just have a
comment.
concluding thought. Because I understand where Gene's coming from and the rest of the board. The reason I brought this up is because I have heard for several years about the issue of not having enough business in town. I am aware there is a plan that keeps, hopefully next year it gets pushed back because you all are busy. But I am concerned that if you try to, you may propose it to convert our districts to B zones, you're going to get pushback for the same reasons, right? There's this tension about, well, then you're kind of doing the same thing I'm doing. You're removing residential for business, or the people who own that property, you're going to say, why are you doing this to me? This is my house. Why are you, so you're going to, there's a push-pull here. I was trying to thread the needle here because, for example, R6 and R7, they're already offices allowed here, right? We're already doing that, right? So we shouldn't state there isn't business in our zones already. I was trying to allow it more within the existing framework of our business zones. I understand the push-pull. My personal view is the town should broadly allow uses that people might do, and then if there are already enough barbershops, there's not going to be one, but if people want one, it's going to get built. Like, I wouldn't say it's, my personal view is it's not the board's job to ensure each block has certain businesses. You can be somewhat narrow, right? You don't want like auto shops in various places and whatnot, or like heavy industry, but within businesses that seem to have high demand in town, dance studios, fitness, tailors, barbershops, if people want that stuff, there should be more opportunity in places. But, that's all I've got. So I appreciate the conversation.
Great, thank you. Any other commentary before we ask for a motion? Is there a motion from the board?
Well, just so we can have something to test, I'll move for no action on Article 38.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
We'll take a vote for no action for Article 38, starting with Steve.
No.
Jean?
Yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. So we will vote no action of a vote of 4-1. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the conversation. Okay, the next article is Article 39, which is to add 17 Palmer Street to the MBTA Neighborhood District. Any discussion, starting with Ken?
None here.
Shayna?
None here.
Jean?
Yeah, this is good. The owner requested it, and it made a lot of sense. It fits into the MBTA zoning, and as we discussed last time, it appears to be very appropriate.
Steve?
Yes, I think it makes sense in terms of the map, and it is also contiguous with the existing neighborhood multifamily district.
Great. I'm supportive as well. Is there a motion to recommend favorable action for Article 39?
So motioned.
Second,
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. The board will recommend favorable action for Article 39. Note that this is a simple majority requirement for voting. Article 40 is two-family construction allowed by right in R0 and R1. And I will start the discussion with Ken.
When this was first brought up, I was sort of on the fence with this one here and thinking that let's bring this up to the town to decide and see what the town wants to do. But I've been thinking about this for a while now, and I think this is just we'll get confused with ADAs. ADUs, sorry. We already have ADUs, and so getting another unit in on the R0s and R1s can happen already. So I don't think that this is going to lead to that much more, and it just adds a little more to it. That's I think it will confuse the matter here a little bit more. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Ken. Shayna?
So I think that this is a useful attempt to find spaces that additional units could be added in an appropriate neighborhood character. And I support it moving forward. A question was raised in some correspondence I saw about process and whether the appropriate process had been followed, notification process, and I believe it has, but I'd like to ask of my colleagues or of Claire whether you're aware of any process issues.
I'm not aware of any process issues with this amendment. It is a change to the use table and not to the zoning map.
Great.
Thank you, Shayna. Jean?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a good idea to bring to town meeting to have a discussion and vote on it. You know, we've heard a couple of reasons people have given for opposing this. One is, well, then there are going to be trees and green space lost. But really, if you walk around any neighborhood in Arlington, trees and green space are being lost now when older homes are torn down and replaced with the largest single-family home that you can put on a lot. So all this would do is, instead of having one large single-family home on a lot that probably will go on the market for about $2.5 million, you'll have a building of the exact same size, except there are two units in it, and each one will probably go for about $1.5 million. It's still incredibly expensive, but it does add some more housing to the community. The nice thing I think about this article is it maintains all of the same requirements of the single-family home. For the two-family homes, height, open space, setbacks, things like that. So you're not getting things any more crowded than you would get with a single-family home. It would be exactly the same. So it's really interesting. I have to give this little aside from my years teaching planning and land use law, because there is something related to this here. You know, the Supreme Court first decided that zoning was constitutional, that you could tell people that they couldn't do something with their property back in 1926 in a case out of Euclid, Ohio, where Euclid was sued because somebody owned property and, they were zoned so they couldn't do with their property what they wanted. And the theory behind it was, well, you can separate industrial uses, smokestacks and things like that, from residences, because you don't want residences to be affected, and people living there from noxious industries and fumes and things like that. Okay, that makes great sense. But then what's the rationale for not allowing two-family homes in a single-family zone if that's the rationale for allowing zoning at all? And what's the rationale for not allowing any sort of residential in a single-family zone if the real rationale is separating uses? So what the Supreme Court came up with is that the people who lived in apartment buildings are quote-unquote parasites. And if they lived in the single-family zones, what they would do is they would destroy the single-family zones and people living there. And that part of the Euclid decision's been criticized ever since it was issued, but now, in the 21st century, a lot of writers have written that the most important thing that zoning does is maintain single-family districts. But I think it's hard for me to come to the conclusion that having two-family homes in a single-family district is going to be bad for the district or bad for what the district is like. As we know, and I live in the R1 district, there are lots of two-family homes sprinkled throughout the R1 districts that were built before there was zoning. And, there are some around the corner from me, and they're next to single-family homes. And whenever those single-family homes are sold, they're sold for a whole bunch of money. The fact that they're next to a two-family home hasn't had any impact on the fact that they're sold for an incredible amount of money. And if you even go down some of the streets in town, you'll see ones that were one-family homes, then at some point they were converted to two-family or multifamily, often during the Depression when people were trying to save their homes. And now some of them are back to one family. So I think, I think this should go for town meeting. And I think the town meeting members should have a debate about this. It will require a 2/3 vote at a town meeting. And I think town meeting members are elected to make these sorts of hard decisions along with the easy decisions they have to make. So I'm in favor of sending this to town meeting.
Thank you, Jean. Steve?
Yeah, I'm also in favor. I agree that this will probably not change the envelope of what's being built as replacement homes, but, instead of having one large single family, instead of having, say, a 4,000 square foot building with one dwelling, you'll be able to have a 4,000 square foot dwelling with two. And, it's a little more than half the cost of what the single family goes for, but the new single family goes for, but it is a significant difference. Arlington's 2024 town report was published recently. According to the assessor, the average single family in Arlington, most of which are used, the assessed value is $1,077,000. According to Banker and Tradesman, they're actually selling for a little over $1.1 million. So when you can start to, have the option of Getting new construction in the 1.2 to 1.5 range, it's not that much more than the used buildings, and the new ones are really efficient. They're all electric, they have no fossil fuels, and they have to meet the enhanced stretch code. In communities and actually states that have done this, Minneapolis being the first, the change over there has been very slow. And that's just a function of when, all your parcels are basically built out. Only so many turnover in any given year. Oregon did a similar thing statewide. In Oregon, cities and towns of 10,000 or more have to allow 2 families in areas that had been previously zoned for single. Cities and towns with 25,000 or more have to allow 4 fourplexes. And there's been, in Portland, there's been a bit of uptake, but outside of that, it's been slow. So I think this will be I expect this to be a gradual change that will, make a difference over time. It took us, decades to kind of build ourselves into a housing shortage, and it will probably take a few decades for us to build ourselves out. But I'm supportive of this moving forward.
Great, thank you, Steve. So I am supportive of the proposal in terms of the change itself and of town meeting debating it. However, I'm not able to support this going to town meeting because I don't think that there's been any engagement with the homeowners in these districts, which is something that I said from the get-go was something that was very important to me and I think is very important to the town. With many districts of only 11% of the residents coming out and even voting for their town meeting members, they don't know that this is happening. And I think that because this is a change of use and not a map change. In a map change, there is notice to the abutters and to those who are affected. I think we made it pretty clear early on that we wanted there to be engagement with the residents in the town, and I wish there had been because I am supportive of this change, but I think it's a challenge to move this on and for town meeting to make a decision when so many people who live in this town in these districts don't know that this is something that we're discussing. Any other thoughts?
Madam Chair, if I
Yes.
may, realizing that this is a citizen petition, and I recognize that the petitioner has, published a couple of the pieces in your Arlington. I'm just curious what you would see as an acceptable level of outreach and efforts of public engagement.
Sure. So I think that there are opportunities to have called precinct meetings much earlier during this process, once it was identified that engagement with the town to ensure that they know that this is an article that's being discussed. Even before the warrant article, when discussions were being had back in December, it's now April, and I do appreciate the article that was written in your Arlington, but I don't think that enough has been done.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm happy to hear from the proponent, too, if you'd like to introduce yourself and come to the microphone.
David Levy, 95 Rhinecliff Street, Arlington, Mass. Proponent. Totally take your point. I would say the following. I wrote one piece in your Arlington over the summer. That's our local paper. And in fact, we passed a town meeting warrant article just to start moving advertising for all public, advertisements into your Arlington away from the Arlington Advocate just because of its uses and stuff. I wrote an article authoring, saying this is why I'm doing it again before the March 17th. I let everyone know I was going to be here. That did make the rounds in the Arlington list and Facebook. In fact, at one point I even publicized my phone number on the Arlington list. Call me with any questions. In fact, when we were last here, there was one person in particular that asked the question, spoke in opposition, but asked a question about, certain fairness applications. I wrote another response in your Arlington to that. and addressed it again, and then that made it. So, and I did in my correspondence say I'm going to continue this. So, I guess, job, family, kids, what was me, right? Happy problems. But, I feel like I've done a fair amount, just also managing my other obvious responsibilities. And I haven't come to the conclusion lightly, right? I mean, I started thinking about this in August.
Yeah.
It's taken some time. And so,
I
don't know, oh, sorry. But we just have a disagreement about this particular piece, but take your point, and there's
Yes.
nothing further for me to say.
Great, thank you. I mean, I think, Steve, the other thing that I just want to mention to you is the board has not moved this forward. This has come forward a couple of times through citizen petitions, and I think, again, that one of the reasons the board hasn't moved this forward is because, again, in my view, this does deserve a significant amount of broadcast for us to be able to comfortably feel that the work has been done to engage all of the voices that need to be heard in this debate. I think we did a phenomenal job with that, with the MBTA communities, of hearing many voices, many different, and I think that enriched the proposal. I think that is certainly the plan with, and is already in process with the business district work that is being done leading up to town meeting. I certainly do not fault the applicant for having many competing priorities. My question is, as a town, for a change like this, should it come from the board, or should it come from, somebody who does not have the planning department resources and other resources to engage in these types of public discourses? I think town precinct meetings are one way to do that, but again, personally, I feel that we would be doing a disservice to the many people who do not know that this is happening.
I agree with you.
Any other discussion? Is there a motion?
I move favorable action on Article 40.
Great. Is there a second?
I will second.
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Shayna?
Yes?
Ken?
No.
And I'm a no as well. So we will move this forward with favorable action by a vote of 3-2.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I respect your position. I should have said that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Article 41 is our next article. Oh, and sorry, I should just state for the record, as I have for the other articles, that this is a 2/3 majority vote requirement for town meeting. Article 41 is a warrant article related to Affordable Housing Overlay District. There is no main motion included because of a noticing requirement. This article is not able to move forward. So I would recommend a vote of no action unless there is any further discussion.
You motion, so I can second it?
Second.
Yes, I am motioning it. You are
I'll
seconding?
second, yeah.
Okay,
Oh, sorry.
fantastic. We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
I will take no position on Article 41, Madam Chair.
Okay. Jean?
Yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
And Kim?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. So we will recommend no action by a vote of 4-0 with 1 abstention. Okay, that will appear on the consent agenda as no action. The next article is Article 42, which is amendment for a zoning map. related to the Affordable Housing District, which is in the same position. There was no noticing, and therefore we are not able to take action. So I would recommend, or I would like to make a motion of a vote of no action for Article 42.
I'll second that.
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Madam Chair, I take no position on Article 42.
Thank you. Jean?
Yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. The next article is Article 43, which is a article related to public shade trees, which is a citizen petition inserted by Susan Stamps. And I will turn it over to Ken to start the discussion.
Well, I'm not in support of this article here. I am in support of having more greenery in Arlington, but I think this article here puts too much of a restriction, I think unintendedly, on growth and development in the town. So I think that there are other ways to get more trees or other more green areas. I think it's a great intention, but I think this puts too much of a burden.
Thank you, Ken. Shayna?
So I appreciate seeing this. I had a couple of concerns with it. Is 6.3.4B, if the tree warden has already approved a list of trees, I didn't see it necessary that the warden approve the choice for each individual project. And let's see. So that was one concern. My other main concern was in E, where I felt like there was some prescriptiveness that that might make it, in fact, more difficult to locate trees in a way that would be suitable to the nature of a unique parcel. So those are my two concerns with this.
Great. Thank you, Shayna. Jean?
Yeah, first, I appreciate that Susan made many changes in this from the previous version. We saw, I think, taking into consideration many of the comments that we made. I think all of these are good proposed changes, and I'd like to go through them and tell you why.
Okay.
Let me start with the tree warden approval. The most obvious example of this just came out with the brewery last time, where there was a list of trees that the brewery could choose, and they chose dogwoods, I think, or whatever they chose. And then we suggested they talk to the tree warden. The tree warden said, no, those aren't particularly good trees for that location. There is a list of trees, but not every tree is right for every location. I think the real advantage of having the tree warden take a look at it is exactly what happened with the brewery. Changing it from a height of 10 feet to a caliper of 2 inches makes sense. That's really the more important of the two. I like the idea of watering by the owner, and as we said, the USDA Forest Service manual rather than American Standard Nursery makes sense. The trees located within 20 feet of the public way, my understanding, are still considered town shade trees. So from a very legal point of view, it makes sense to add that, but it clearly does allow us to, in exceptional circumstances, plant the trees elsewhere on the lot, which we do on occasion now. So I don't think it really hems us in any more than we're hemmed in now. So I think all of these are appropriate changes. They don't require people to do things that they're not doing now. It just makes it, I think, a little better process to go through. So I think these are good changes. I favor them.
Great. Thank you, Jean. Steve?
No, I appreciate, I see In the latest draft of the main motion, I see a lot of the board's hearing comments reflected. And overall, I'm seeing mainly three differences. One is a change in maintenance standards. The second is getting the tree warden more involved. And the third is, making an effort to position shade trees within 20 feet of a public way, but I agree that there is latitude to handle situations where that might not be possible. I think this is, I'm supportive of this.
Great, thank you, Steve. I too really appreciate the changes that were made with the board and input, and I agree. It was actually nice to have that example from the most recent hearing to better understand what benefit could come from the tree warden's approval, and whether again that was, you hate to add bureaucracy and additional steps to this process for our applicants, but I agree there does seem to be value to that. I have no problem with the caliper piece as well. I don't know when the redevelopment board would designate another standard. I know that was in there previously and it was crossed out and put in this section, but my question for the board is, do we want to keep that in? I don't know that the board is going to opine on that, so this is a time to just set the standard. I think that, and again, I could go either way on that. I just want to ask the board that question. And the other two questions I have, there is the item around replacement trees of similar size are required to be planted by the owner in the event of the tree death. We don't have anyone monitoring that. We identified that was not feasible to have monitoring. So is the zoning bylaw where we want that to live, or is that a special condition, a standard special condition that we would want to include? That's a question I have for the board. And like Shana, I do feel that the two additions in E hem us in. I think we have plenty of flexibility, and the intent is consistent without making the changes in E. So again, two questions for the board. I would remove E, and that's what I have. So Steve.
So regarding the ability to choose an alternate standard, I think the real question is, what if something happens to the USDA Forest Service? And in the current state of things,
That is fair.
We might want to leave ourselves the option to choose another standard
Thank you.
if necessary.
Thank you.
Yep, I agree. What we said was on the replacement tree piece was reporting won't make any difference because people aren't going to follow up on the reporting. But we put many, many conditions in special permits, and sometimes we can follow up on them and sometimes they're not. So I don't see this as particularly different, and I think it's just better to have it in the bylaw than to remember to put it in a special condition each time. And I'm fine with the way E is amended, and I'm fine keeping E the way it is. Yeah, I don't have strong feelings about E.
Shana?
I agree with both Jean and Steve about the standards, and I think Jean makes a good point about replacement trees. I think with the changes to E removed, I could move forward on this.
Ken?
I think all the issues that are brought up here, we already addressed when we do review the projects. I'm just cognizant of just adding too much of a burden on development and just adding more layers of this bureaucracy to it. I appreciate the point, I want to support this point, but I just don't want to make it so litigious right now that it seems onerous for someone that wants to come and do something. And when you look at this, we do address all those issues. They are important to us, and I think, if we did spent as much energy doing addressing the town on other areas that we take care of some of the heat islands, it would solve the same problem. I think putting it all on the burden of development here is just discouraging development, and I'm not supportive of this.
Okay, thank you. Who is responsible then for monitoring and ensuring the replacement of these trees after their decline? I'm cognizant of some of these, of putting these things in that we don't have any enforceability.
I said to the tree committee, I think that should be their job. That, I think what they should do is go out and look and see whether these things are really taken care of or not, and if they're not, they can report them. I think it's a perfect volunteer
Well, Gene,
thing to do.
monitoring is one thing, enforcement is another, okay? So, yes, we notice that there's issue, and let's say the tree committee comes back and says, look, they let all the trees die. Who's going to enforce it?
Do we reopen the special permit?
Well, there are two things.
So, that's just a legitimate question.
We can reopen the special permit, or the inspectional services has the ability to enforce the zoning bylaw. So they could say to inspectional services, hey, this is going on, and he has the ability to say to them, you let the trees die, you can't do that. And the rule is, the tree warden will tell you what to plant in their place, and you've got to do it. Either he could do it, or we could reopen the special permit.
To be fair to the building department, they're also in charge of enforcing signage. And I don't see that being attended to quite, we have a full set of signage regulations here, and I look everywhere down the street.
It's terrible, and if we had a sign committee, I would say the sign committee should be out there making a list all the time and doing it, but we don't have a sign committee. We have a tree committee, and I would say to the tree committee, as I've said to Susan, I think it's the tree committee's job to do this. It's,
the notification, but I go back to
Who's
enforcement.
enforcing it?
Yeah, that's the part. If there was some sort of enforcement, I would say, hey, I'll be more keen
well,
to.
there is. We can bring them back and open up the special permit, or the, inspectional services can tell them they need to get the trees replanted.
So I'm certainly not going to hold up my approval because of that, but I think this, like several other items, there is something that we need to address. And I know, Claire, we've talked about, for example, for signage, is there, and for enforcement of some of these zoning items, is there in the 2026 town budget, for example, a request for a enforcement officer who lives between the Department of Planning and Community
Right.
Development and the Inspectional Services Department, potentially.
So, I could, it sounds like, with the exception of Ken, who's not going to support this, is it fair to say that the rest of us would support this if there's no change to E?
Yes.
Yes.
Is that acceptable to the proponent?
And if I could just ask, if you wouldn't mind coming up and just stating that so that we could hear that for the record, if you could introduce yourself as well, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate this very thorough discussion. We did specific.
I'm sorry, if you could just introduce yourself.
Oh, yeah, I'm
for the
sorry.
record.
I'm
Thank you.
Susan Stamps. I'm the proponent of the the article. And I really appreciate the discussion. Of course, if you want to take out the changes to E in order to vote for this, I would appreciate that. I would like to advocate for keeping in those 2 changes in E because I think the idea of the board was to try to get more trees planted because the tree warden and the tree department have limited capacity. And so I think this is to require developers to plant street trees. It's honestly, it's revolutionary, and it's very exciting for the town to take this step. And this is just doing the same thing, except that if the conditions don't allow putting the trees on the sidewalk, they can be put back on the property. There's still ultimately choice on the part of the redevelopment board. If there is no room in the first 20 feet, I'd be surprised if they could be located in the first 20 feet of a building that, in the commercial areas. But it's possible that it could be, and if it could be, well, why not make them plant the tree? Or if there's some other place on the property, if there's no room on the sidewalk or in the first 20 feet, there probably isn't going to be any room on the other side, anywhere else on the property. But if they could plant some trees or a tree somewhere, it doesn't really matter where it is on the property in terms of helping to cool the town, cleaning the air. So I would like to see those options left in, but I'll take what I can get.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we now do, even without the changes in E, the board does have the ability to
Place
have
them
the,
elsewhere on the lot.
right,
Yes.
place them in the lot. So
Agreed.
I would make a motion for favorable action on Article 43, eliminating the proposed changes to 6.3.4E.
Second.
Great, we will take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
Did we
Ken?
get the second motion?
Yes, Shayna seconded
Oh, okay.
the motion.
No.
And I'm a yes. So we will move forward with favorable action with a vote of 4-1 for Article 42. This is a 2/3 majority required vote at town meeting. Okay, our last article is, our last article before we go back to the beginning for the rest of the night is Article 44, which is an affordable housing overlay district. There was no main motion submitted, so we will not be able to take any vote other than no action unless there is any other discussion from the board on this. Okay. Is there a motion to recommend no action on Article 44?
Motion, no action on Article 44.
Second.
I will take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. Steve, did you want to vote on this one?
I will not take a position on Article 44.
Let's re-vote. So is there a motion to recommend no action, or excuse me, to recommend no action on Article 44?
So motioned.
Second.
We'll take a vote again. Steve?
I take no position on Article 44.
Jean?
Yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. So we will take no action. That will move to the consent agenda by a vote of 4-0 and 1 abstention.
Can we take a 5-minute break?
Let us take a 5-minute break, and then we will come back
Thank you.
to Article 25. Thank you very much. Okay, we are going to restart, jump back into the
Well,
meeting.
what do you think about
Continuing
this?
the open public hearing. And we will now move to Article 25, related
definition
to
of principal
accessory dwelling
dwelling.
units. And I'm actually going to turn this over to Director Ricker, because I believe
so
that we
many
have
things I think
a couple
confirmed
of decision points to make on this article. And hopefully you can start us off on that, and then I'll turn it over to Jean.
Great, thank you. So we have had several rounds of sort of creation and editing and commenting on the changes necessary to the zoning bylaw to bring us into compliance with the state with regard to our accessory dwelling units. And I believe our assistant director has been working with the law department to make sure that as we have moved through the drafting of the amendments that may be necessary, we have been checking back in with our law department to see if they do meet the terms of the guidance related to ADU policy that we have received from the state, up to and including a memo that we received this afternoon from Town Council explaining that really their recommendation for the best way to move forward here is to amend the zoning bylaw to reflect the state guidance by adopting the model zoning bylaw as it was provided by EOHLC and MAPC. That model zoning bylaw wasn't provided until, I want to say, and Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, early last week or potentially late the week before. So it was nothing that anyone really had in mind or in their possession while we were crafting the draft amendment. So I believe that the board has seen the memo from the law department. I did ask Sarah, Assistant Director Suarez, to please put together at least a bit of a draft that would better reflect or that would more closely reflect the guidance from EOHLC and MAPC. It's really for discussion by the board and contemplation as you are looking to amend the ADU sections of the bylaw.
Great. Any questions for Director Ricker? All right.
Yeah, actually, yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Now, I agree that there's like a lot happening. The draft, the model bylaw was not released until after this board's last meeting. So this really was a oh wow, what do we do now?
Right.
I was curious if you had a sense of which, draft language that we'd been working on independently that Town Council has seen, and were there any specific issues? Because that I mean, to me, this is the hardest thing to sort of get my head around is we see that Town Council has made a recommendation for something different, but not understanding, why and what was wrong with the other one. That's basically where I'm at.
If I can ask Sarah to respond to that. She's been working most closely with Town Council and with the board on this project.
Hi, Sarah Suarez, Assistant Director, Planning and Community Development. I've been working with Town Council and with Deputy Town Council. The guidance is really to just kind of follow the model ADU. Was there anything specific that was wrong in the draft that we most recently provided? It doesn't follow the model closely enough. It doesn't have the definitions. It doesn't provide for, some of the requirements that the state very, very lately provided to us, as, you know, all municipalities are going through this exact same thing. Everybody is frustrated and aggravated. But to Deputy Town Council Munson, her position is that the easiest way to avoid any issues is to just follow the model ADU, because we do have a unique situation in which we do allow ADUs already in our bylaw. So several, you know, we're one of a few municipalities that actually do allow ADUs already. We allow them with less restriction than what the model ADU is requiring. So there is some discussion back and forth, and that's part of what Jean and Steve and I were working on, and also, you know, building inspector Champa. We worked with the chair of the ZBA, deputy chair, the co-chair. And it's really just, as a board, we kind of need to decide if we want to adopt the model ADU, which allows for protected use, Dover amendment, you know, specific ADUs that are permitted in single-family zoning residential districts, which encompasses any zoning district that allows a special single-family home either by right or by special permit, which would include all of our residential districts. We also allow accessory dwelling units right now in our business districts. So the model zoning doesn't really take into account the fact that we allow ADUs in our business district. So the state's position is also that a principal dwelling unit it's just the building. It doesn't matter how many units are in it, that's your principal dwelling unit. At the town of Arlington, we have, I believe, been under the interpretation that a principal dwelling unit can apply to, say, in a two-family, each unit could request to build an ADU. So under the model zoning, we would have one accessory dwelling unit that is a protected use by rights, ADU that could be permitted. As far as a second ADU, we would have to follow their guidance for a local ADU, which would require a new definition. But a local ADU is any ADU that is not a protected use ADU. So there's just it's a lot of confusion, it's a lot of back and forth. We have two proposals that, the one that I put together this afternoon, which is the model zoning. However, I tried to incorporate the changes that Jean and Steve and the rest of us have worked on for the past couple of weeks. But it does add substantially more definitions. It basically is a rewrite, but taking out a lot of the model ADU language that is not relevant to us. For instance, requiring parking spaces for ADUs. We already do not require a parking space. I don't know that it's the intent of the board to want to start requiring a parking space for an ADU. But we are in this place where we need to have a nice discussion.
Thank you. Jean? You're up.
So let me start by saying, I was at a meeting most of the day and feel like I was really blindsided that we didn't get to even see the memo from town council until sometime this afternoon. I actually wrote, but was smart enough not to send, an email to her that said, please don't send us stuff a few hours before the meeting and expect us to know what to do with it. But I did read it. I did email her back and say, tell me anything that is in ours that is inconsistent with the state law and requirements, and you all probably got the email back that came during this meeting that said something like, oh, I just think you should use the model, but you don't have to. I'm just giving you advice. You can do whatever you want. So the problem with, let me say, if we were a town that never had ADUs before and would have to, from scratch, write a bylaw for it, the model would be a good starting point. It's not a really great model, but it's a good starting point. But we do have bylaw for ADUs that's been in place for a couple of years, and that's used well, and that everybody knows how to use. And what Sarah, Steve, and I endeavored to do, and I think we succeeded, is to take our current bylaw and just change it so it's consistent with the state requirements and not otherwise change any of our requirements. Now, I haven't had time to look very much at what Sarah put together, and I wouldn't want us to make the decision tonight without looking more. But I took a quick look just before, I got here a few minutes before the meeting. Let's take, for example, the definition of principal dwelling that's proposed. A structure, regardless of whether it or the lot it's situated on, conforms to zoning, including use requirements and dimensional requirements, such as setback, bulk, and height. But we have so many principal dwellings in town that are non-conforming. Under this, the non-conforming ones wouldn't be entitled to get an ADU. And this is just my really quick look. Somewhere else in here, it said something about the non-protected ADUs having to have, up to more than 900 square feet. I've forgotten where it is. Someone else in here, it gives the building inspector the authority to decide whether something is, I've forgotten the exact word, reasonable or not. You never try to do that. You try to write the standards into the bylaw to the extent possible. So I haven't read the whole thing, but what I can say is Steve and Sarah and I spent a lot of time on this. It's the one that you have, and I'm just going to go through it very briefly to see the changes. The definition of ADU you can see added, which may be detached, or internal, which is sort of taken from the model. It's really not necessary to have here because we say that elsewhere in our bylaw, but it didn't really matter a lot to keep it here. One of the things we did have to change was the state law defines gross floor area as measured from the interior faces of the exterior walls, not from the exterior. So we thought it was important to make that change. Then Sarah came up with a really nice set of purposes which are closer, if not exactly, the state purposes. So we put those in instead. One of the things that Sarah mentioned is that the state law only requires one ADU. They call it a protected ADU, but we actually have more than one protected ADU because we have ADUs that are protected under our bylaw because they're like for multifamily in the business district. So it creates a false dichotomy, in my personal opinion only, to call some things protected ADUs and some things local ADUs, when they're all protected and they're all local. So I just thought that was heading us in the wrong direction. And similarly, under the state law, single-family district is anywhere where you can have a single-family home as of right, which we no longer have in the business districts. However, we allow ADUs in the business district, so we therefore rewrote the beginning of the requirements in B1 to reflect that. We added the gross floor area. B1B is very important because up to now, if an ADU is more than 750 square feet, you would have to go into that special permit category, but you can't do that under the state law. So B1B B is, allows you to do up to 900 square feet without that. Again, one of the things in the state law, which makes no sense, but it was in the state law, was if you have a second ADU, it has to get a special permit. And that's also amazingly in the regulations. So D now says the first one's as of right. The second one can be allowed with a special permit, and it uses the criteria we use. Then for the setbacks, we basically made some minor changes to the setbacks to make them more consistent with how it's really been working. And in my conversation with Mike Champa, how that chart with type 1, type 2, type 3 only applies to garages and not to other sort of structures. So we made that change in B1E. Then we got rid of the administration because that's no longer appropriate, that there has to be a family member. And we do need in C, we don't need the number 1, Sarah, because there's only one paragraph if you see that administration. And then because under the state law, you could theoretically have an ADU in a multifamily building, we just crossed out the part that says within the existing single-family, two-family, or duplex, because, you can have one in an apartment building. And that's it. So, Steve might have some things to say about it too, but I think we spent a lot of time trying to make this work within our own bylaw, using our own terms wherever possible.
Thank you, Jean. Steve?
Yeah, I've probably had more time to look at the last-minute copy just by virtue of running into Ms. Suarez while I was parking my bike and she was stepping out of the office, and she advised me to check my email. But I think that, with respect to the model code, the model code comes with a checklist for, people writing, putting together their ADU bylaws, along with lists of things to do and things not to do. And we did make a number of modifications based on those do and don't do criteria. For example, one of the don't do criteria is you can't word your bylaw in a way that gives local preference, or is to benefit the members of a community. So, the purpose section, it no longer mentions Arlington. It just talks about residents and property owners. Another don't that we noticed was do not use terms in your bylaw where the meaning conflicts with the definition in the model code, and that's where we noticed the conflict with the definitions of gross floor area. I would prefer to stick with what we had developed. I respect town council's guidance, but it's, the version that we have been iterating on, I think we're familiar with, and the alternate scenario, I don't think we've had, enough time to digest.
Shane? Okay, go ahead.
Based on your opinion, do you think that if we are to pass this, let's call it our ADU regulations or zoning, would it pass the muster for the Attorney General's office when we actually give them this to certify?
Steve?
Well, I don't know, because I'm not the Attorney General's office, but I think we have made every effort possible to comply, to modify our local bylaw in a way that complies with both the state regulations and is consistent with the model code. Now, in the event that the Attorney General would find issue with it, we're a town, All of our changes go to the municipal law unit for review, and what I presume would happen is if they felt something was unenforceable or questionable, they would, in their decision, tell us as much and tell us what we needed to do. So I think the worst possible outcome is the Attorney General might find something, they would say, you can't do this, or you need to do that, or you should have done this instead, and we have to sort of take that as it is, and then, make a correction the following year.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I'll add a couple of things. We're not required to use the model bylaw. It wasn't written by the Attorney General's office, and they haven't reviewed it the same way they haven't reviewed our bylaw at this point. I think what we...
Just to confirm what you just said, the model bylaw has not been approved by the AG's office. Thank you.
If you find otherwise, let me know, but that's my understanding, that it's gone through EOHS and whatever.
So it was EOHLC with MAPC.
Right.
And actually all of the guidance that we have been getting through the webinars over the past couple months have included the Attorney General's
But
office,
I don't think
so.
they've actually sort of said, yes, this is the way to do it, as the only way, and it's clearly not the only way to do it. I would, if we choose to go with the version that Steve and Sarah and I put together, I would ask, the staff to send it to Town Council's office and say, tell us if there's anything here that needs to be changed.
I think that's why you got a memo, because I sent it to Town Council on Friday after we made the changes.
But I asked her today, and she didn't say. I mean, if there's anything...
We have no specifics at this
We
point.
have no, the only thing she said was something about the 700 square feet and 900 square feet, and I explained that, the provision in there deals with that. So, yeah, I think that's the only thing. And as Steve said, I haven't, we've just gotten this new version. It's worth looking through. In my really quick scan this evening, I found at least 3 things that I really felt needed to be changed, and maybe there are others. Maybe people will disagree with me about it.
I found 2, and they may be different than yours.
I can guarantee there's probably others because I started putting this together this afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
So.
No, it's totally fine.
And it's hard to do that in a
this-
short period of time.
No, I mean, the body of text that we're proposing to amend isn't big, but it was the result of weeks of work.
Yep. Sheena?
So first of all, thank you to the 3 of you for all of your work, your extensive work. Really appreciate it. I think, as Jean has said and Steve has said, I'd really like to see from Town Council a deep review of the language that the 3 of you drafted, specifically for compliance with the excuse me, with the model regs.
With law and regulations.
With the law and regulations, that's right. If what you have drafted is compliant with the law and regulations and is in Town Council's opinion going to bring us into compliance, I think that it would be best to move forward with what we have. If not, it would be great to hear where it's deficient.
Right, it might be easier to change this than to
That's
take the
right.
model bylaw and do stuff with it.
That's right. Thank you, Shayna. Yep, and I agree. I think after reviewing both, there's quite frankly a lot more work that I think needs to be done, and this is not any type of criticism of, trying to pull this together at the last minute because it's an impossible task. And,
Right.
and quite frankly, our bylaw is idiosyncratic in the way that it's written and structured, and I think that there is an amendment process through our town meeting process for when there are changes that need to occur. So I believe that we do have time, to your point, Sheena and Jean and Steve, for town council to do a more thorough review prior to town meeting, with us still moving forward with the document that we have worked hard on to ensure that it is, that we're in alignment with. I think I would feel uncomfortable, again, having read through and already seeing several things that I think are a challenging fit with many other sections of our existing bylaw, to get behind tonight as putting forward for town meeting. I did have two questions for Steve and Jean, given your work on, that's on the original modifications that were proposed. So section 5.10.2A, number 4, the definition, single-family housing, obviously we allow ADUs in housing that is not just single-family housing. Can you just speak a little bit to that language? Because I think that that's something, and you started to before.
It's a good question for Sarah, because she wrote that language.
So can you repeat the section?
Yep, so my concern is in 4, under purpose, number 4, 5.10.2A, 4, where it says, the purpose is to develop small-scale infill housing that fits in the context of zoning districts that allow single-family housing.
I think that's a good point.
I think, again, the purpose in Arlington isn't just for it to fit within single-family housing. It's also for, again, we allow the business districts that doesn't allow single-family housing anymore. It's for properties that are single-family duplexes and two families, but it's not, I don't know that this necessarily fits within the broader purpose that we actually have identified in Arlington.
So
Steve?
what would you think about just taking out the words that allow single-family housing?
Or that fits in the context of zoning districts that allow.
No, then you just take out, so it fits in the context of zoning districts while providing.
Zoning districts.
So you just leave out that allow single-family housing.
I mean,
Of existing zoning districts? I mean, what we're really saying is that we're trying to not create new zoning districts, right? And that this fits contextually
Right, so
within the
develop-
neighborhoods.
right, fits in the context of zoning districts. And then you take out that allow single-family housing.
I'd suggest taking a little bit more out.
Okay,
So develop small-scale infill housing that provides gentle hidden density without detracting from the existing character of the affected neighborhoods.
I would
Sounds
agree
good.
with that.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you, that's very helpful. Just gonna make that strike through here. Okay, and then my other question was in, just a little bit below that, in B1, you may have actually revised.
We did revise it
This.
recently.
Is, Mr. Benson, the changes we discussed to B1E,
They should be there. It was,
For any
It
ADU.
was
I think
the
you
that
removed
made
the
the
redundant section.
Oh, okay. All right. I probably have an older copy.
Oh, they just sent this around sometime.
Yes, it looks like
Late this
you
afternoon.
removed the redundant item in the latest version that I had identified. So I'm all set, that just the, Section A purpose. Provision. Ken?
I think this is good. I think, can we create a little small chart saying, you know, here's what we have to change to comply with the state, and here's what we already had that we're still keeping.
I think we're going to need to create something in order for me to present this to town meeting. So
Yep,
yes.
yes, good point.
Because parking is not mentioned here at all, right? Or it is mentioned here, and we're silent on parking.
Well, the parking part didn't change, we're not requiring parking.
We're not requiring it, but do they require parking?
No, they leave it up to us.
Oh, okay.
So I think, for example, that would be, if we take the different sections of it would, you know, we could identify
Yes,
parking,
okay,
no change.
perfect, yep.
Right.
Or we could just identify the things that we had to change and what we changed. That might be easier.
Whatever's simpler.
Then,
That's fine.
you know, rather than, we didn't
That's
change this,
fine.
we didn't
Nope,
change this, just
that's
what we
fine.
changed and why.
No. It's, yes, I had the earlier version of the April 7th memo and not the later version of the April 7th memo,
see
but I
how-
see it here now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, there was some redundant language that was removed in B, so I don't have any further comments. So again, I think I'd be in favor of recommending, seeing if someone wanted to make a motion to recommend favorable action on Article 25 with the
One amendment.
amendment from this evening on the submitted language that was created by the redevelopment board, with the provision that we request that town council provide a thorough review prior to,
Can we make two motions?
meeting.
One
We-
is,
we can.
one is, you know, favorable action on this, and
and
then
then
a
a
second.
separate motion for that?
That
We
would be
can certainly
better
do
in
that, that's
terms-
cleaner.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. So is there a motion to recommend favorable action on the article developed by the redevelopment board as amended this evening?
Article 25.
Article 25, thank you.
So motioned.
Second,
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
yes.
Shayna?
Yes,
Ken?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. And Jean, did you want to make that second motion?
Yep, I move that we ask town council to review Article 25 and identify any inconsistencies with state law or regulations that we need to fix.
I'll second that.
I'm just going to make sure, any
These with
inconsistencies?
state law or regulations that we need to fix.
State law or regulations that need to be addressed. Any specific? Great. We will take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
Yes,
Shayna?
yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. All right.
yes.
Did we need a second?
I think,
I thought we had a
I
second.
yeah,
seconded
I
it.
seconded it. No, he made the motion.
You made the
Oh, I made the
motion.
motion.
He seconded it.
Yes.
Yes,
The reverse of the usual.
great. So with that, let me find my agenda. I have many. Apologize, give me 1 second. I have many, many windows open. So with that, we are at the conclusion of our hearing for the 2025 town meeting warrant articles. Before we move to asking for a motion to close the hearing, I do want to just identify that Article 25, the vote threshold is a simple majority, just for record.
Oh,
Let's see, so Our next meeting on April 10th, correct, Thursday,
Right.
is to review the report to town meeting. We do not need to have our public hearing open for that. That is separate and outside of the public hearing. So is there a motion to close the public hearing for the warrant articles related to the zoning bylaws for spring 2025 town meeting?
So motioned.
Second,
We'll take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean?
yes.
Shayna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Congratulations.
Yay.
We will thank in advance the Department of Planning and Community Development, first of all, for all the hard work that has gone into
Right.
preparing all of the meeting materials throughout the hearing, and also for the very, very fast turnaround of the report that the board will review on Thursday that will be submitted to the moderator for town meeting.
Yes, thank you. Incredibly good job by
Yes.
everyone.
Richard, you want to have this meetings be held at our old meeting room?
Yes, Claire, would you, for the record, be able to share the date,
Sure.
or the time and location
Absolutely.
of our Thursday meeting?
So the board will be holding a meeting on Thursday, April 10th at 7:30 in the first floor conference room in the Town Hall Annex, which is the conference room right out in front of the DPCD office. The meeting will be held to vote on the ARB report to town meeting, make any amendments as necessary, and then vote on the report as amended.
Great, thank you very much.
Do-
I thought we'd said 7 o'clock. Did we
I
say
thought we said 7, but the website says 7:30.
7:30.
Okay, so it will be 7:30.
7:30.
Okay.
Yes. Thank
When
you.
do you think you'll be sending it around
We,
for our review?
It has to be posted by tomorrow.
by tomorrow evening,
Evening.
we should have a draft put together to be posted with the agenda.
Well, you need the agenda posted, but I think there's you don't necessarily need the supporting documents with the agenda.
I can assure you that you will get it faster than you got the law department memo this afternoon.
So if the draft is posted, that does not preclude the redevelopment board from sending tracked changes. What might be helpful is if you could send a Word document to the redevelopment board at the same time that the PDF is posted with the draft report is posted with the agenda. And if I could request, I know that this is work also, but I think it will be less work than waiting until that evening to receive
Agreed.
any modifications.
Yes.
That, if I can ask the board, if you have modifications ahead of the meeting, to please submit them in track changes in the Word document to the
If we have time.
department. If you, again, have time.
Would
to review them
SharePoint be an
before
option
meeting.
for this? If not, then track changes are fine.
I like
We can
track
use
changes.
SharePoint for this. Sure.
Okay.
I like track changes in Word document.
Okay.
I do too, I find that easier, but,
Me too.
so let's,
Okay.
if you wouldn't mind, I think if we could do it that way.
Okay.
Okay, great. So that, I think, concludes our logistics for the next step in the warrant article process with agenda item number 2. So I'll now move to agenda item number 3, which is new business. And I'll turn it over to Director Rickard.
Great, thank you very much. I wanted to talk in new business a little bit about our AMP Up Comprehensive Plan update kickoff meeting that we had last week, but I think Steve may have some thoughts about that meeting as well. It was very successful. We had well over 125 people in the Arlington High School cafeteria. There was a brief presentation made by Stantec, and then about 45 minutes or more of table work that was done by participants, and they worked all the way up until we practically had to kick people out. It was a very lively meeting. I think people were happy with some of the outcomes, and certainly with the exercise that was done. People started by writing a brief social media post or newspaper headline from the future on how Arlington may be in 2035, and then talked around the table talking about 5 great places in Arlington that they love, and then 5 places that need improvement, and then there was a report back at the end of the meeting. So very successful, and we're happy to continue the process. Another item of new business that I wanted to share was that this afternoon I had the opportunity, along with the town manager's office and Sean Garbely's office and Dave Rogers' office, to meet with Phil Eng. In the town manager's office. He came to Arlington to see us this afternoon, and we had a great discussion about a couple items that I know this board was interested in. One is the redevelopment potentially of the the Alewife Garage, and the work that's being done there. There was a brief presentation made about the CSO issues along the Alewife Brook, and an ask of the MBTA that, while certainly not their responsibility solely, but, any project that they do at Alewife should include some sort of mitigation related to CSO, and Manager Eng was very receptive to that idea. The other thing that we discussed was the Arlington Heights bus turnaround. We talked a bit about the building. We were assured by Jen Mecca, who's the deputy director of TOD for the MBTA, that the issues of flaking paint will be resolved shortly, and that we can move forward with our mural project that we had planned. But I think most interesting was that we talked about construction potentially of a connection to the Minuteman Bikeway through the MBTA property to allow for public access up to Mass Ave from the Minuteman Bikeway, as well as potentially the idea to include some public parking, either event-related or regular public parking on the site, as it is relatively underutilized. So a productive meeting this afternoon with Manager Eng, and I think it is important that he did come to Arlington and to meet with us. And it was hopefully we asked for, and I think we will receive a seat at the table, especially when talking about the redevelopment of the Alewife parking garage project.
Great. Thank you very much. Fantastic updates. Steve?
Yeah, so just a little bit more about the comprehensive plan kickoff. Along with that event, we now have a website for the comprehensive plan. I think there's a shortcut from the town website. Well, the non-shortcut version is engagestantech.com/Arlington-comp-plan.
Memorize that.
Bookmark
You
it.
can also use arlingtonma.gov/comp-plan.
Okay, yep, that's easier. But this has a copy of the presentation slides as well as a recording of the event. Stantec has committed to doing sort of like online counterparts to all of the in-person events. So there is a virtual survey where you can fill out similar questions to what was asked last Thursday night, and a little map that you could put pins on if you were interested in identifying your own favorite places, special places, or points of concern.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Jean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a really nice kickoff event, not simply, but in part for the number of people, but also, at least at the table I was at, everybody was really engaged in the discussion and interested in what other people had to say. And it was some of the sort of people we usually see at these events, but also some people we don't usually see at these events. So I thought that was really nice also. Alewife Garage, I had to go into Boston a couple of weeks ago for a meeting at noon, so I got to the Alewife Garage about 11 a.m., and so much of it is blocked off for construction because it's falling apart that I had to drive up to the roof to find a place to park. So that was really crazy. And then I went into Boston this weekend for the rally, and the place was full of cars, you know? And so I just wonder, you know, the two towns that, according to the stats I saw, that have the most people drive and park at Alewife are Arlington and Lexington. Did he say, like, how they're going to handle, you know, taking down the garage and putting it up and where the parking's going to be?
So we didn't get into that level of specifics. One thing that I did hear that I thought was very promising was that, you know, when they issue this RFP for a developer, they really are starting from zero. They really do want this to be a public-private partnership from day one. You know, they are not going to be evaluating development plans or anything like that. They're really sort of just looking for a partner. So I think those sorts of logistics and specifics are still to be worked out. I think really the upshot and the positive outcome from the meeting is that Arlington will be at the table when they do.
You know, one thing that it would be really nice to ask them to do is when they go through the MIPA process, there's a way, and they have to agree to this, where there's a process set up with a community advisory committee, something like that. And usually people don't like doing that, but it seems to me like for a project of this size, the town should be asking the T to commit to doing that when they file in MIPA. Also, I heard that they put out an RFP for the building and the turnaround.
They did.
What do we know about
They
that?
put out an information for bidders. They are looking to find a tenant for I think it's about 800 square foot commercial space that's there. I mean, they always maintain a restroom and a break room for the bus drivers in that building. But they did put out, you know, recently a preliminary information for bidders for those to bid on a lease for that little commercial space that's inside. So that is active on the street right now, as far as I know.
Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you. Shana?
Nothing.
Ken? I really do appreciate the update and the engagement with the MBTA. I know that that's something that we have a lot of engagement at this board from both the board members as well as folks who come in and want to understand all of the different ways that Arlington interacts with the different public transportation options. One of those options is, or one of those questions typically is, and it's something that we contemplate for things, everything from decisions to these warrant articles, is bus service in Arlington. Was that something that was discussed as well?
It was discussed pretty extensively. Some of the answers that we got were that they are in the process of staffing up, and that one of the places that they really needed far more staff was in bus operations, especially bus drivers. And so that is one of the reasons that service has not been as frequent as advertised or as expected, especially on the 77 bus. They think that they've released the spring schedule yesterday and updated those bus headway times at least, you know, for the spring. And they do believe that they will be, you know, adding buses and adding drivers, you know, as we go along. The superintendent of schools was there and made it clear that, you know, we use MBTA buses to get kids to school, and that, you know, there have been some problems with that. And I made it clear, you know, in the process of comprehensive planning, MBTA communities planning, that sort of work that we do, that one of the things I hear a lot is, you know, how are we planning, you know, these transit oriented, making these transit oriented plans, when what I hear so often from the community is that our service has been diminished and declined. It's very, very hard to plan, and they seem receptive to that, and did respond with, well, we do think, you know, they didn't commit to bringing the 79 bus back or anything like that, but, you know, we did talk quite a bit about increasing headways on the 77, and I believe also on the number 80 bus was also brought up as a potential mitigating route that may be helpful.
80 is the one that runs on Route 2?
80 is the one, I believe they were talking about trying to take it through to the Tufts Green Line extension. and making a better connection to the Green Light extension through Arlington.
Great, thank you. Anything else? Okay. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So motioned.
Second,
Take a vote, starting with Steve.
Yes.
Jean.
yes.
Shayna.
Yes.
Ken.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.